Can you just make me the screen share real quick? And I'll share the slides.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should have thought this ahead of time.
It's okay.
Make a co-host.
I forgot to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. And all right, how does that look?
It's good.
Good?
Yep.
Okay.
It's good.
All right. Whenever you're ready, Janet and Mary, I'll follow along.
Okay.
Okay, do you want me to start, Janet?
Yeah, you go. I think because
Okay.
yep.
Yep, for the first. Okay, so overall, we're going to present today just a summary of gross motor development for toddlers and preschoolers. We'll start off with some background information and some references, and then we can answer any questions and see where everyone's at. All right, so Stacia, if you want to flip to the next slide. So one of the primary points that Janet and I thought were important to make is that movement drives learning. So you're going to look within motor development. We look at physical growth, the ability to independently direct movement and physical activity, which then leads to children being able to explore their environment. So those are three, big aspects for motor development on its own. We are going to consider the impact on essential non-motor skills. So the concept that movement drives learning is that the more that children move and explore, the more they can build on their cognitive, their communication and language, and their social and emotional skills. So as they explore their environment, as they're able to independently seek out their resources, where they are, then the more that we're going to see build those other skills. Movement activates the brain. So overall, as we move, we're stimulating our neurons, our pathways in our brain. Crossing midline helps coordinate the right and the left sides of the brain. So we have our corpus callosum and all of our pathways that are going from one side to the other. As we move, as we build those, especially as infants and as children are developing, that can help coordinate that for future learning. So it was going to strengthen your neural pathways necessary for language, for literacy, and math skills as children get older. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Another part that we wanted to just touch on is that we look at input and output. So a large part of input can be your visual system. That's how we're going to receive, process, interpret our visual information to build a representation of what our visual environment is. So that's something to consider if you have visual impairment, of how that's going to affect how you want to modify the input, that a child's receiving, and just have that awareness there. Our proprioception is the awareness of the position and the movement of the body. In each of our joints, we have mechanoreceptors that tell us kind of where that joint is in space. So that gives us feedback on where we're moving, how we're controlling our body. The vestibular system helps us create a sense of balance and spatial orientation. It's for the purpose of coordinating our movement with our balance. So it's really, if you're going to feel like you're off center, kind of feel dizzy, right? Some of that input is coming from that inner ear system and our vestibular system there. The other aspect that we're going to consider is interoception, and that's the perception of sensations from inside the body. So they're physical sensations that we're going to feel, but it's how we perceive it. So a common example is hunger, that, you know, you might kind of feel that hunger pain inside. Everyone perceives that maybe differently, depending on your body and depending on the input and how you receive that.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about acquired skills within age ranges. And I just want to start out by saying that there's always a variation. And it's so, for example, what's 0 to 3 months, it's not set in stone, but these are the typical things that we would often see during this age group. And I wanted to talk, or Mary and I had both said we wanted to make sure we talked about this because sometimes our children, they might skip some of the skills, especially their tummy time skills, for a variety of different reasons. Certainly being on your tummy is very, very challenging and it's a lot of work. And sometimes our children, they know it's a lot of work and they're not always happy being there. So our job as therapists is to help parents to give you strategies on how to play with your child on the floor or in any of the other positions that we're going to talk about tonight, to vary play and to make it interesting for them. And then also to know when to honor when they've maybe had enough. I think we've seen that tummy time can be challenging over the years. Maybe certainly we have our back to sleep program. So our babies are on their backs more. They're in containers more, whether it's their car seat or the variety of different seating systems, you know, the little sling seats that we have that we use to help entertain or to move our kids about. Sometimes maybe they have reflux and being on their stomach is just not comfortable for them. And like when Mary was talking a little bit ago about the interoception, they can associate that discomfort with being on their stomach and wanting to avoid that. So some of the things that we do look for through the 0 to 3 months, one is that they're going to clear their nose from the surface by turning their head when on their stomach. And I really tried to find pictures that kind of reflected that too, that they can lift their head to clear their nose, and they'll start to take some weight on their forearms, as you can see with the little guy in the little blue shirt there, and he's lifting his head up even more than in the first picture. And then when they're on their back, that they'll their chin and chest, they hold their head in midline when they're on their back, and they're starting to bring their hands towards midline to their mouth or maybe to a toy that's presented to them. 4 to 6 months, we start to see children start to roll. And maybe in the beginning, they're rolling from their backs to their side or their side to their back. And then they learn to complete the position. Just a little thing that to think about too is sometimes if the tummy is not a favorite position, playing on your side is also a really nice position. It brings hands and legs to midline. It's and then from that sideline position, you can work towards your tummy or towards your back. So you're helping to put your baby a little bit of an advantage for that movement. In addition to rolling, you're going to see children push up on their arms more so that they get those elbows a little bit straighter. They start to lift their chest up off of the surface, and they're shifting their weight more from like their upper chest and head down their spine towards their bottom, which helps them to bring that chest up and clear and to look around. You're also going to see when they're on their back that they're going to bring their feet up towards their mouth. So they bring their knees up to their tummy and they play with their feet. Oftentimes they'll bring their feet towards their mouth, and they're going to reach for toys when they're on their back. And then in sitting, they're going to start to use their arms for support. The other little bit that I wanted to add here, because Mary touched on this too, was about vision. But the other, just always think too that vision helps to lead movement. So paying attention to where you position toys or where you position yourself so that you're encouraging, for example, if you want your baby to work on lifting their head up, then you want to make sure that what you're presenting is up a little bit for them so that it does encourage them to look up. Or if they're working on going from sitting down to their tummy, that you position the toys in a way that encourages them to work over their sides to follow that toy to then lower to the floor. From 7 to 9 months, we're going to start seeing our children commando crawl. So that's where they're on their tummy, like this little guy in the gray jumpsuit there. So he's on his tummy, but he's using his arms and his legs to pull himself across the floor. And they'll go from that position to getting up onto their hands and knees. And rocking on their hands and knees, and then moving towards creeping on their hands and knees. You're going to see children learn to sit on their own and move in and out of sitting. And I love the picture of this little one in the pink shirt, because that's a great shot of a child weight bearing on one side. You can see that she has her weight on her right side. She's got her left foot up, and she's going to use that foot to help her pivot from sitting to go over into hands and knees, and then actually back up into sitting again. And then our children are going to start to take weight on their legs when they're placed in standing. And I love this picture with dad and baby, because I just love how they're looking at each other and engaging with each other. And that's such a huge and important part of play as well, too. From 10 to 12 months, our children are going to start to pull up on everything. They're going to pull up on you, and they'll pull up on furniture. And actually, if they are pulling up on you, I really encourage you to let them use you rather than taking their hands to help bring them up to stand. Let them use your legs or your shirt or your shoulders or your chest to try and get up to stand. You want them, you want them to use their hands and know they can use their hands to help explore and get themselves upright. And if we're holding their hands all the time, we just kind of take that away from them. Once they're up and standing, children will often start to cruise. And if you have a little one that's working on cruising and they haven't quite figured out how to go like the length of the couch, putting your children in the corner of furniture. So whether it's in the couch itself, like we see in this picture here, or maybe you bring a chair or an ottoman over so that you've narrowed that space down and they can work on the inside corner to start taking steps. And that's a nice way to start working on the cruising. And then once they figure that out, they'll start to put it together to shift weight from one leg to the other to be able to start taking side steps along furniture. You'll see children start to walk with help and eventually start taking steps on their own, as we see in the two bottom pictures. In 13 to 15 months, we often see children start to walk on their own. And once they've mastered keeping their balance to be able to walk, they'll start to push up to stand from the middle of the room. So rather than using you or using furniture to try to pull up to stand, like this baby on the bottom and the left, she's going to get herself in that hands and feet position and shift her weight back up onto her feet. She'll get into a little bit of a crouch and she'll pop up to stand. And in the beginning, she might get her weight back on her feet, get into that crouch and try to stand and sit back down. But she's just going to keep repeating that until she's successful with getting up to stand. And then from there, children will be able to walk up to a toy. They'll stoop to pick up that toy and return to stand and then walk away carrying it, as you see in the bottom right picture. 16 to 24 months, this is a little bit broader span of time. But here we're going to start to see children creep upstairs. So it's like a crawling pattern that they'll go upstairs, and oftentimes going downstairs, they'll stay on their tummy. They'll just go feet first and kind of slide down the stairs. And from there, then you'll start to see children learn to walk upright. So they may use the rail and your hand held, or they may use the wall like you see in the top picture on the right, where they have their hand on the wall and mom or dad is holding their outside hand and then they're stepping down. And usually children will start by placing both feet on the same step. So as that little one comes down, he's going to bring his right foot down, and then his left foot is going to meet that right foot. And then they'll repeat the pattern. And we do kind of pay attention to whether they're creeping upstairs or walking up and downstairs. We'll pay attention to which foot leads first, whether going up or going down. And over time, we'll start to try and assist and help your children to start switching their feet so that their movements are symmetrical. And that's one, I should have mentioned this earlier, but that's something that we are always trying to pay attention to early on, is symmetry of movement, that we're not seeing anyone use only one hand or only moving out of sitting over one side, that things are equal at this stage. So that both sides of the body are having equal opportunity to develop and strengthen. We're also going to see our children start to kick a ball without falling down, and they'll actually, like in the bottom picture on the left, you'll see where a child can stop. They can stand on one foot and they can lift that free foot to try and kick that ball forward. They'll start walking upstairs on their own. So typically they'll start out by using a rail, and same thing, they're going to typically place both feet on the same step and work their way up a flight of stairs. Also, around 2 years, children are going to start to jump down from a step, and they're going to start to jump in place. So I think that's good. From 2 to 3 years, children are going to start to get up on their tiptoes, and they're going to start to take some steps on their tiptoes. And this doesn't mean that they're walking on their toes. It's just that we're starting to see growth in strength and balance for them to be able to reach up high, maybe get something that's up on the counter, or just to be able to balance on their toes to take some steps forward. Their jumping is going to broaden. So they're going to jump forward longer and longer distances. So at the beginning of that second year, you might see them jumping 6 inches, but by the time they're 3, some children will be jumping up to 3 feet. And when they jump, they're going to their takeoff will be off of both feet, and they'll land on both feet at the same time. And they'll start to jump over things. So maybe it's like a pool noodle that's laying on the ground, and they can jump over the pool noodle. Or there's a hose out in the backyard, and so they can jump over segments of the hose. They'll start to place both feet on stairs to walk up and down without a rail. So like the middle picture, you're going to see this little guy where he's going to be able to go up those 6 steps, and he's not going to need a rail to help him go up or to come down. And then they'll also progress to going from where they're placing both feet on the same step to starting to alternate their feet. So they'll go right foot and then left foot, or left foot, right foot, up and down. They'll start to catch and throw a playground ball with somebody. And I would say, somewhere like 3 to 5 feet away, but visually they're going to focus and attend. They're going to be able to stand to keep their balance, and they'll be able to bring their hands out to draw that ball in, and then they'll work on tossing that ball back to whoever they're playing with. And in addition, throwing a tennis ball, they'll throw that tennis ball with an overhand toss or an underhand toss. And over time, we look at oftentimes children will start out where if they're tossing a ball, their feet are pretty stationary, their trunk is pretty stationary too, and they're just pushing that ball forward. But as they get older, you can see that they start to step forward with the opposite leg of the arm that's throwing, and they have some nice follow through and some nice trunk rotation as they release that ball. And they're throwing to a target. So they're busy between 2 and 3 years of age. There is a lot going on, and it's always very exciting to watch them achieve all these different milestones. Ages 3 to 4, you're going to start to see your children's learning to stand on one foot. And over time, they'll start to maybe hop on one foot. And they'll learn to not only, again, thinking about symmetry, that they can stand on the right foot and they can stand on the left foot, and they can hop on the right foot, and they can eventually learn to hop on the opposite foot. Their running is going to become more coordinated. So when children first start to run, they kind of have a little bit of a wider base. Maybe their arms are kind of up at what we would call mid or high guard to help give them some stability at their trunk. But as they grow and mature, then those arms come down. You're going to see them start to move their arms back and forth across their body, have some nice trunk rotation, and there's going to be more hip and knee bending. And if you can see the little one in the pink outfit, both feet are really off the ground. So there's a flight phase to their running pattern as their balance and their coordination and their strength improves. And then 4 to 5, you're going to see improved balance to really stand on one foot for longer periods of time. They're going to sequence their hopping as we see in the hopscotch, and they're going to go from 1 foot to 2 feet. You're going to start to see more galloping. So that's kind of that step 2 pattern, where they'll gallop towards the right, and then they could also gallop leading on their left side. And with regards to ball skills, they're going to be able to bounce and catch a ball while they're standing. So again, think about how much vision you need to be able to participate with that skill. You keep your balance, you bounce the ball, and you're going to catch it. So we wanted to talk a little bit about W sitting too, because we do know that a lot of our children tend to W sit. And just to think about alternatives to W sitting. Oftentimes, I think the children that we see as physical therapists, our children, they may have lower muscle tone, or they may have decreased strength, which often just fosters them to get into that position. Maybe they start to creep on their hands and knees. And when they come back up to sitting, rather than kind of side sit to get into sitting, they just drop their bottom back, and they land with their bottom between their legs, as in the top picture. And you can see from that top picture how broad her base of support is, right? It's very, very wide. So it gives her a better sense of stability. And when you are a little bit more lower toned, or you have decreased strength, children are always looking for ways to find stability. The challenge with that position is that it kind of locks her bottom down between her knees, and it doesn't give her or foster any reason to move, especially to rotate and get out of that position or to reach for toys. And it puts a lot of strain on the ligaments around your hips and knees that we want to avoid. So when you have a child that W sits, we often encourage parents to try to introduce different positions. So it might be that your child sits with their legs out, and you cue them to bring their legs out. So like you might say, legs out straight, or maybe you sit with your legs crossed. So you'll say crisscross applesauce. Or you can use different things to sit on. So I love trying to come up with different things that children could sit on. For example, sitting on a bench, or maybe they sit on a potty chair, but getting them up into what we like to call a 90-90 sitting position. So that's where your hips are at 90, your knees are at 90, and your feet are under your knees, provides a nice stable base of support. It's a very functional position. That's what you and I used to stand up from all the time. It encourages them to keep their weight through their feet on the floor as well. So the little bit of information I'm just going to plug into that too is that if you have a child sitting in a toddler chair, for example, or in a high chair, we're always looking for ways to make sure that we bring the floor up, or a weight-bearing surface up to our children's feet. So if they're in a toddler chair and their feet don't touch the floor, then we might put a box under their feet so that they can truly weight bear through their feet in that sitting position. Or a step stool, you might use a step stool as well. And oftentimes we'll just problem solve with what you have in the home to try to come up with ways to give them a nice weight bearing surface.
Janet, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Could you just touch upon the difference between muscle tone and muscle strength?
Yes. So muscle tone is the tension in your muscle at rest. So it's a passive, it's passive in nature. And so there's a continuum of tone, right? So you can have very, very low tone, and you can have very, very high tone. And so when I think about low tone, I would think about those children who maybe are W sitters, or those children that when we go to pick them up and we put our hands underneath their arms, you don't feel any sense of them holding, right? They might feel like they're falling through your hands. Or when they're sitting, they tend to sit with a very rounded posture. They're often sitting kind of back on their tailbone or their sacrum, with what we would call a posterior tilt. And then strength has to do with using your muscles and working against gravity. It's what how your muscles come together to create a force that allows you to work against gravity. Does that help? Okay. Mary, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's a good explanation. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And are there any other questions on W sitting before we go on to toe walking?
I had a
Alyssa
question.
has a question.
You mentioned making sure that their feet aren't dangling when they're in the high chair or in a toddler chair. What do you recommend for the high chair to make sure that there's something supporting their feet?
So again, it's going to depend on the type of high chair you have. And if they're long enough in their high chair where their knees go over the edge of the chair, if you can kind of picture what I'm imagining, so that they're from their knee down, their feet are going over the edge, and they're still not reaching that little platform, then we just look at ways to maybe build that up. Sometimes I'll take pool noodles and tape them on, or use Velcro, or that's probably the biggest thing is we've done is like maybe tape some noodles together and then you adhere it to that platform. I've also had some parents dads are really savvy with tools and wood, is they'll create a block, and maybe there'll be it might be like a 2x4, and then maybe they've got some 1x4s depending on how much height you need. And as your child grows, then you can slide a piece of the wood out, and we'll adhere that to the platform of the high chair. You can also just, if you've got if you don't have access to a pool noodle, and I mean, we're going to have a hard time finding them now. You can take towels and you can fold a towel up enough so that you give yourself a little bit of a layer, and then tape that onto the foot plate of the high chair.
Thank you. And just to confirm, so their knees should be bent then, because you said 90-90, or they should just be resting on something, their feet?
So you know, some of it is just going to be, it's going to depend on the height of your child and how they sit in their high chair. So certainly when our kiddos are younger, they're just not going to have the leg length to when they first start out in a high chair, for example, where their legs are going to extend over that chair enough to be able to weight bear. But as they grow and get longer and taller, then we can adapt the chair for them. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So we wanted to talk a little bit about toe walkers too. I know I touched a little bit on that. Being up on your tiptoes is a developmental skill, but that sometimes our children are up on their toes all the time. And there are different reasons for that. One example would be a neurologically based. So that might be for our children that have cerebral palsy or different muscular disorders such as muscular dystrophy. Or maybe your child has had a stroke, and so there's one side of their body is weaker than the other. Then there's also something called idiopathic toe walking, and that's a diagnosis of exclusion. So there's no underlying cause or reason for them to be up on their toes, but it may be associated with some developmental disorders such as autism. Toe walking is always bilateral and it's always symmetrical, and it can be linked to hyper or hyposensitivity. So an example with hyposensitivity is maybe your child doesn't like the feel of any surface on the bottom of their foot, and so they are up on their toes. Or maybe your child is hypersensitive, so they may be seeking more input from the impact felt during walking, and so they're on their toes. It's a much narrower base of support over the surface of their toes, and they're getting a lot more input, and they're using that toe walking to kind of meet that need. And just some treatment thoughts for toe walkers. One thing that we would be watching for is to make sure that range of motion is being maintained. So it might mean working on calf stretches and also hamstring stretches. So calf stretches, those are the muscles that are in your lower leg. But hamstring stretches are also important because the hamstrings, it's a very large muscle in the back of your thigh, but it starts at your hip and it inserts just below the knee. And if your hamstrings are tight, that can also, and you're a toe walker, that can tighten up as well. So you want to make sure that you keep your hamstrings limber and loose. We would work on active range of motion, and ways to work on that might be to stand on a dynamic surface without shoes, with and without assistance. So things that we might use there would be a balance board or an incline wedge, so a wedge of some sort, or a Dynadisc. So those are those discs that have air in them. They might be a smooth surface. They might have little bubbles on the top of it. But when you are standing on it and shifting your weight, it's moving under your feet. We might try doing different animal walks. And we do have a few pictures in a few minutes. So doing bear walks or crab walks, or doing frog jumps. So frog jumps was, where you would get down low and you would jump forward, landing on both feet, really working on landing on a flat foot, or doing a penguin or a duck walk. So where you might, again, have your hips and knees bent. And when you're walking, you're really trying to get those heels out so that your heels are striking first as you're walking forward. We would work on strengthening. So there's, we just call it toe basketball with cotton balls. And you can do this in sitting or standing, but your child would be barefoot and they would try to grab a cotton ball with their toes, pick it up and drop it into a cup. Certainly if you're sitting, you've eliminated the balance piece of it. But if you're standing, then you're going to have, you'll be working harder on balancing on one foot, keeping that foot you're balancing on flat on the floor as you're trying to lift those cotton balls and drop them into a cup. You can also do something called a beanbag elevation. And again, you could do this sitting or standing, where you would place a beanbag on the top of your foot. And so the beanbag would be on your foot. I'm using my hand, but you would be lifting it up. And in order to do that with your foot, you have to do what's called dorsiflex your foot. So you're working the muscles in the front of your lower leg to try to strengthen them. Let's see, working on scooter board propelling. So sitting on a scooter board and using your heels, really digging your heels into the ground to try to move yourself forward. Again, you're really trying to work those muscles that are in the front of your legs, opposite your calf muscles, to work on strengthening. Working on jumping hurdles. And again, when you're jumping your hurdles, that you're taking off and you're landing down on the entire surface of your foot. Sitting on a therapy ball with your feet on the floor. And so that's working on lots of things, right? So you're on the ball and you're sitting, and maybe you're sitting at a table in front of you. You're really focusing on keeping your feet flat on the floor. But the therapy ball is also, it's a mobile surface. So that's going to work on your core strengthening too, which is also really important. And then you can also try having your child stand inside a box. So picking a smaller box, and where it really does foster them to try to keep their feet flat. And they could do something like playing catch, or maybe they build a puzzle. And in the beginning, you might have to be close to them to help them with their balance. But as they improve their ability to stand with their feet flat inside that box, and you can up the challenge for what they're doing. You're going to include some different sensory strategies. For example, joint compressions, or using vibratory input on the bottom of the foot, allowing for barefoot exploration so that they can get that sensory input across the bottom of their foot. Also using something like grippy socks, where they get that tactile input from the rough surface of the sock as it hits the floor. And then sometimes we'll also look at shoes. We might consider high tops. We might try something like a squeaky heel for their shoes. And sometimes we look at orthotics. And in this instance, the AFO is just an ankle foot orthotic. So there's lots of options, but there's a lot of problem solving that would go into that. And there's a lot of different opinions about use of orthotics for toe walkers amongst therapists, certainly amongst orthotists and even physicians.
Janet, I guess what's so bad about toe walking?
So that's a good question, Kim. So, I mean, lots of children do toe walk, but if you think about it, it really narrows their base of support as they're walking. So it can challenge their balance more. It could potentially result in more falls. It makes things like going up and down stairs more challenging. It may impact the fluidity of their running. So it can filter down with a variety of, with all functional skills. Did that answer your question? Okay. And then we have a few pictures here of a crab walk, of somebody playing the little toe basketball where they're sitting in a chair and they're picking up the cotton ball with their toes. So they're really working those muscles in the bottom of in their foot, right? Because we really want to work on that strengthening. And you can see too that he's got his foot in a nice dorsiflex position as well. So he's using his muscles and the front of his lower leg to pick up that cotton ball and then drop it in. And then the picture on the right shows somebody in a bear walk position where our goal is to be able to get into that position and keep our feet flat and our heels on the ground.
Okay, so Janet and I put together just some different ideas and suggestions. Play is the work of a child, so we want them to play. We want them to explore. The first list here was just to reimagine daily items. We do this on a daily basis. Use what's in your home, look at it from a different angle, and create a new use for it that's fun, that lets your child explore it, and then you get benefits from it overall. So one of the items is a laundry basket, so you can practice climbing in and out of it. Some kids like just to be inside of it. You can push and pull and give rides. You can fill it with, stuffed animals and have the child push and pull and give them heavy work. So there's a lot of different ways that you can explore and just play around with that. A beach towel. Janet has a great strategy to roll it up and make it a balance beam. You can roll it up, jump over it, walking on it, just different stepping and activities there that you can use. We use pillows and cushions. You can make an obstacle course. So either you have to climb over, jump on, step on. You can have, if you have two pillows, have them step on one and have to reach behind and get the other one. So you have to squat down and lower and balance and put the other one in front of you, almost like lily pad, hops or something. Pretend that you're the frog and you have to set the lily pad in front of you to cross the pond. You can make up different games with them as you go. I know Janet suggested the boxes already, even setting those up just for stepping in and stepping out. You could have different heights so that you have to have your standing balance and really shift your weight to clear that foot over. So you're balancing on that foot longer, the higher you have to lift that other foot to clear it. So different thoughts, and use what you have access to. Building tunnels using blankets and cushions. We love to do, crawl through the tunnel, pretend it's a car wash. You can add the blanket, give some sensory input there while they're going through, choose which way they're going to go through. Maybe they go forward, maybe they go backward. You're working on going under, going over certain things. You can add pillows underneath to go through. If you have a tunnel, you can put pillows inside the tunnel, have to climb over them. You kind of get more of that input and pressure there. Body bowling with stuffed animals. So line up all their favorite stuffed animals. You have to roll one way, roll, knock them all down, switch sides, roll the other way, knock them all down. The kids get to help set them up. There's no wrong way to do it, so explore, get them moving, move a different way. But like Janet said, let's work on that symmetry. So if they do it one way, okay, next time you set it up, face the other way and make sure you're working the other side. The blanket taco, I might let Janet jump in and explain, because she's got this down to a science. Do you want to give yours?
Sure. So we would take a blanket and roll your little one up in the blanket, and like make sure their arms are out, right? And then once they're all rolled up, then I would ask the child, what do they want in their taco? And so maybe, you never know, sometimes it's peanut butter and sometimes it's milk, and sometimes it's actually cheese and tomatoes. And then based on what the child is saying, like if it's peanut butter, then giving the child some nice deep sensory input down the length of them as they're rolled up in their taco. Or if it's tomatoes, then we might do a little bit lighter touch. or it might be something where we give them a little bit of a squeeze, and then we pretend to eat the taco up, and then we would unroll them. And then sometimes I would actually be the taco, and the children have to push me, so they get some nice heavy work. Hopefully they're on their knees, and so that they're pushing me to roll me up while they're on their knees. So they're getting some nice work in kneeling, and they're using their upper body, again, getting some heavy work there. And then we're working on language too, right? So they're asking me, what do I want in my taco? And just playing with it, you know, they usually have a great time, and so do I.
Right. And then we have outdoor. So you have things like a hose, jump over, step over. You can, arrange it throughout your yard. Just spread it out, make it a visual cue. You can, adjust the height if you want to layer it and make it, longer or wider or higher. There's just lots of flexibility with each of those. Then we have a list for some dollar items that are just some nice, easy craft household items that you can keep on hand to come up with some new games. One of them, I like to use cray paper for a lot of different games. So I'll actually tape them from wall to wall, all different heights, all different lengths, use painter's tape. It doesn't bother anything, but then have the child have to step over, crawl under, shift the weight to maybe step over each side. You can adjust the height if you're trying to jump over a certain height, lower it so you're jumping over, the paper tears easily, you're not going to trip over it, we're not going to get hurt and fall. So it's a nice, good practice place, and the paper tears up. I don't know, like I've had we tear it all up and make it, now it's garbage and we have to get a garbage truck and clean it all up, right? You can just make it into a game, try to make it fun, let the children lead. That's where I like to go with those. Balloons, you can always do catching, throwing, kicking. If there's any visual concerns, sometimes you can get little bells and pop a bell inside the balloon before you blow it up. And then you have some cues that way. As it lands, you can hear it jingle, you can shake it and hear it jingle as you're playing that way. Pool noodles, we love to use. You can swing them as a bat, you can jump over them. You can cut them in half and adjust them if you want it to be a lower height. So there's a lot of different things you can do with those. Bubble wrap, stepping, jumping, I'll tape those down too with painter's tape and pretend it's a puddle and you have to jump into it. Pretend you're a piece of popcorn and you're jumping and pop and pop, pop. So kids, you get that sensory and auditory input as they're working on, those other skills. So those are just some different ideas there. Bubbles, you have to visually track, reach for them. If you can get some of the big bubbles, they're great for reaching up and having kids try to catch using both hands. And then using beach balls. Janet suggested too, she likes to add a little water inside of those. It weights it down, so it's great for kicking so that it's a little slower. And sometimes too, even for catching, that can slow it as a child's trying to catch it. So you give a little more time to track it, to process, and then be more successful with catching and throwing. And I think that is at the end of our,
Yes, I think that's the last slide.
so we want to open it up for questions.
Can you guys give us some of your go-to activities for increasing core strength specifically?
Mhm. Who wants? So I can start, and I think it probably depends. Well, I love a therapy ball. So I'll if you have an exercise ball or the big therapy ball, I like to work with the ball and sitting, or with your child on their stomach. We might work on even going from sitting out onto their stomach and then back up to sitting, using that ball as they push off of the ball to move in and out. or maybe you go from being on your tummy and you go out over the ball so that you catch yourself down on your hands, and then you have to push yourself back up again. I love hands and knees. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, hands and knees, and you can do this anytime and all the time at home. Once our children are up walking and we still want to really work on strengthening, then I think hands and knees for me is probably one of my big go-to positions. And so Mary had talked about using a tunnel, for example. So climbing through the tunnel, laying your tunnel over couch cushions or over pillows, or stacking your pillows so they have to climb up the tunnel and then climb down and be able to catch themselves on their arms. Putting your couch cushions on the floor and having your children just creep on hands and knees over the couch cushions, and varying the heights of them so that they have to accommodate that and be able to not only creep up, but then when they go down, use their upper body to catch themselves as they go down. Go, Mary, and then I'm sure I'll think of something else and you will
Okay.
too.
I know for some of my older kids, I like to have them, if they can lay on the floor, legs and arms stretched overhead, legs stretched out, and use a balloon or a stuffed animal. And either I'll make them trap the balloon or the stuffed animal in between their feet, and then they have to reach up. I mean, it's essentially doing some type of a crunch. They're going to do their own version of what strength they have, but it's impressive how hard kids will work, and it's a good way to isolate, to actually try to get them so they're reaching for that balloon or that stuffed animal from their feet, and then maybe they hand it back to you, or they, make up a game where there's a reason, oh, it has to go eat their food over here or something, and we have to get it again. So cycle some of those things through.
I also like to work in kneeling and in half kneeling. So balancing on our knees, and even if you're just building a puzzle, right? You could take your puzzle pieces and put them on one side, and maybe you need to set it on a little step stool while you're in front of the child and you're holding the puzzle, and then they have to kind of bend over, pick up the puzzle piece and put it back in while they stay on their knees and they keep their balance on their knees. They're still really working on core strength there. If that's too easy, then you can also try half kneel. And half kneel is where, I don't know if people, so half kneel is where you're on your knees, but one foot is on the floor and the other knee is down. And I can move my computer if you need me to show you that. But in that half kneel position, just really trying to work on keeping your balance there, or maybe trying to catch a ball while you're in half kneel, or you go from kneeling on your left leg with your right foot up to bringing your right foot down, and now you're on your right knee and you bring your left foot up. And so you are shifting your weight back and forth. Again, you're working on your balance, but you're also working on your core strength there. If you're younger and you're not a walker yet and you're working on core strength, then again, creeping on hands and knees, working on moving in and out of sitting, kneeling at a bench and going from kneeling at the bench back down to sit over one side, coming back up into kneeling, and then reversing it and going over the opposite side.
Janet, what do you do when you have a child who, for one reason or another, either can't or skips kind of one of the developmental milestones? What do you do when you have a kid who is in, a hip cast because they've had to have surgery, or is in, or who chooses to not crawl, which, you've pointed out a few times how important crawling is,
Mm-hmm.
or who has a G tube, so they will, tummy time, or has open heart surgery, tummy time
Mm-hmm.
just is not an option. Do you find that you have to go back? And I guess I'm asking not only because of the challenges I think many of your children have, but also because some of these kids are receiving services later, thanks to wait lists, than we would like them to be
Mm-hmm.
receiving. So some of these kids are kind of skipping certain areas altogether. do you just kind of move on from that point, or are there certain skills that you really need to go back to and kind of really make sure that the kids have in order to move forward?
So I think it's individual to each child. It depends on their medical background, for example, like some children, I mean, nothing is coming to my head right now, but maybe there are some skills, some positions that they're just not going to use. I will be honest that if I've worked with somebody and they've skipped creeping on their hands and knees, but they're up walking, or we're not successful with it early on, but we do get up to walking. I really do try to find ways to get back down onto the floor to incorporate hands and knees. Not that I would expect them to use creeping as their means of mobility, but just to use it for strengthening and weight shifting. And like Mary had talked early on too about crossing midline and stimulating both sides of the brain. So we'll just try to be creative about finding other ways to use that during therapy to still give them some of that position. And I will say, you know, sometimes you're just kind of adapting your therapy as you go along. So maybe we are working with somebody who just tummy time is just, it's just really, really challenging. And maybe they're 10 months old or they're 12 months old and they're just sitting, but they're not moving out of sitting, but they don't want to move out of sitting. They don't want to lay on their tummy. There's, we're trying to figure out what the reasons are. Maybe it is reflux, and they just have that memory of just not being comfortable there. So we might try to break it down a little bit. Maybe I won't go all the way down on their tummy, or I'll do tummy time on a therapy ball, where rather than having them completely flat on their tummy, that if they're on the therapy ball, they can almost be in a standing position. We're supporting them there, and we can kind of work on rocking back and forth to start to facilitate a little bit of what it feels like to get down in prone or on their stomach. Or maybe they're on our chest, or maybe we wedge cushions, or maybe moving from sit to the floor is really, really challenging. So we will build up pillows or use a beanbag, and we'll work from sideline where we're in this position, we're barely off center, but we're going to work up to sit from there, and we'll do it from both sides. So just trying to break the skill down so that it's, I know Amanda talked about this too. It's like, it's the puzzle, right? It's finding ways that help our children to be able to move, to be more independent, and adapting the skills for success. And then as we achieve more success, then we can up the ante for the challenge to work on the next step, or to complete, to better complete a bigger movement pattern.
It looks like Laura had a question about, she's a 2-year-old who isn't yet able to jump off the ground. He like attempts it by bending his knees, but can't really get anywhere. So is that a concern? You know, he's moving all day long, but is that a concern, and or do you have any suggestions?
So for a 2-year-old, I like to start if he is rising up on his tiptoes or not. So a lot of if you have like suction cup toys, a lot of kids will have like the baby spinner things. If you have a window maybe, or a door window, you can put one of those on just out of their reach. Something that, or I have families put magnets on the fridge. window clings, as long as they're not going to put them in their mouth. But you can put something up high that's going to be motivating to reach up toward, to get them up on their tiptoes, because that's part of the power for the jumping, that we want that strength, as long and then as well as the squat. So kind of the squat to stand activities, you can keep doing those. Put toys on the floor, have them squat to pick up something, and then have to put it up higher in a bucket or a container, depending on what type of fine motor games that they're playing. And then introducing, I like to have families, as long as the family is okay with it, just bouncing on the bed, holding their hands, hold at their hips, to give them a little extra push kind of through those knees, bending at the knees, at the ankle, at the hip, when they're bouncing there, but try to make it, fun and playful, so that they can just kind of get the sensation and the feeling, because it could be just their strength isn't there yet. Does that help?
And I'll just add that jumping is not an easy skill. And there's a lot of planning that has to go into it. And so Mary gave great suggestions. It's a lot of repetition, and it's a lot of working on strength. And, remember that our children, they need to practice skills over and over and over again, and practice pieces of skills, right? So they need to practice those. It's kind of like, even when you think about when your kids first learned to bat at a toy, their movements were very random in the beginning, and they're kind of moving their arms, and then one of those times that they move their arms, they hit something, and it makes that rattle that's hanging over them make a noise, and so then they keep practicing moving that arm until all of a sudden, oh, now if I move my arm, it's going to make that little bell chime, and then their movements become more refined. So it's lots and lots and lots of practice.
I think Ashley had a question.
Yes, and I'm going to be brave and turn my video back on. Hello.
Yay.
I'm kind of going to hop on, like I saw Laura's question, and it's similar. So my daughter, the reason why I found out about this, she gets speech through early intervention, and she was evaluated at 18 months. And so she passed her little checklist for her physical milestones at that point. But she was a late walker, and she always just kind of seems like not very sure-footed. She's not jumping yet. She turned 2 in June. And I always kind of feel like she's like, there's some balance stuff. I remember even when she was like between 1 and 2, there was like a little play mat in like our Fun with Ones group, and like she'd trip over it like every single time. So I got a play mat at home for us to practice like walking over it. But I'm still seeing some of that, like, I don't know, she's running around like crazy, always moving. But like I wouldn't trust her even close on the stairs. We practice holding one hand and doing all that thing. I guess my question is, I love seeing all the milestones and seeing those things. And I know it kind of can change depending on the kid. And she also has a co-articulation thing going on with her speech. When do I go back to maybe my service coordinator and say, is this a concern? Should we relook at her physical to possibly get intervention? Or, I love all the suggestions you gave. Or should we try to work on some of those balancing things? I already love that idea about stepping in out of the box. I was like, oh, she probably can't do that. That'd be a great thing to do at home to start. But I guess when do we talk to our service coordinator about possibly looking into that side of things again?
So she was 2 in June, which she's coming up on 2.5 soon, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And so she continues to need assistance on the stairs, and she's not yet jumping. And you have your speech therapist in there too. I mean, you could have a conversation with her and your service coordinator. I mean, I think you can bring that conversation up at any time, just to share your concerns with them, and just to get another opinion as to how she's doing at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, because I know, like you said, I love what you said about this is the ages, but everyone's a little bit different. So I'm always trying to okay, my first child. So, am I being too picky about this stuff, or just kind of let her do it? So I think that'll be a good conversation to bring up to see with the speech therapist as well. But I was it's nice to hear some of the things that to try and maybe revisit that with the team.
Ashley.
Given I'm, can I just add 2 seconds to that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Janet's in a position of being a therapist. From a parent's perspective, I would definitely talk to your service coordinator and your speech therapist and request an eval, but I would wait until she's 2.5 years and 1 day. And I mean, that's something that there'll be a different checklist that they look at 2.5 years. And
But-
when she's under that, so I guess just in terms of the timing, I think you have everything to gain by trying to be a step ahead of it and by requesting the eval.
Ashley, my name is Amanda.
If you're concerned, you know her best, I guess is my point. You're the parent, you know her best, and follow your gut. Like, your gut's going to serve you well.
Ashley, my name's Amanda. I'm an OT. I would suggest not asking for an evaluation, but asking for consults, because somebody will easily pick up 3 PT consults. And once they like that, we assess your child through consultations anyway, right? And then they can either decide to pick up services or give you suggestions and then check back in with you in a month. But sometimes providers are willing to pick up consults versus like having to qualify through an evaluation. Your child already qualifies because they get speech.
Right. So Amanda, and I honestly don't know the answer to this. I feel like of late, it's been harder to ask for consults, and that they've been going more towards a supplemental to whatever service we want looked at again. And I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but it just seems to be what I'm seeing in early intervention right now. So then what I would suggest is that you talk to your speech therapist and you talk to the service coordinator, Ashley, about what your concerns are specifically, and that you would like somebody to, you'd like to have a physical therapist take a look and assess the skills. And I agree with Amanda that consults, I think, would get picked up easier. It's just from my end, I've seen them going more towards a supplemental. So I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what the trend is right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other pressing questions?
Janet, I was just gonna ask, can you remind us all, like, what's the recommendation for how long to spend on tummy time, or how long to, use, like you said, a container, right? To put your kid in a certain like jumper or seating device. Are there guidelines that you follow?
So yeah, that's a loaded question, Amanda. As far as tummy time goes, and Mary can jump in on this too. I guess, so there's lots of different things. One is, you want your time with your child. You want to be playing with them too, right? You don't want it to feel like it's like therapy and you have to do this work. So I think just trying to fit it in throughout the day. If it's only 10 seconds at a time, then doing it 10 seconds many times throughout the day is what I would suggest. So increasing your frequency, but trying to find functional times for that. And again, tummy time doesn't have to be right on the floor. It could be on your chest. It could be in your arms. My doll's not here. Where your baby is, like we call it, the football hold. So you're swinging them over your arms. It could be over your lap. It could be on a therapy ball. And then yes, watching how often your child is on their back and in a container or on their back. Because, just think about your baby sleeps on their back. They're in the car seat on their back. If they go into, if they stay in the car seat when you bring them in the house because they're sleeping, then they're on their back there too. So it is important to be aware so that you're offering different options for positioning for your child. Don't forget side lying. Side lying is a great position. So maybe your child's not as tolerant of being on their stomach, but they tolerate side lying. So use that side lying position. And then as far as like saucers and jumpers, I'm not a huge proponent of them. Certainly, they're out there. The marketing is very good about encouraging them. Sometimes they do come in handy because you can't always be on top of your child, 24/7. So they can be used and, control the time that they're being used. And like in a jumper too, if I have a child that is up on their toes all the time, that's usually something that I'm going to discourage because I don't want to reinforce that posture. Anybody else have anything to add?
There's one other question in the chat. And then I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And then I think it's about time to wrap up. But Laura is asking, my son falls down a lot. Should I be concerned or is this normal? Should we just work on balance somehow?
How, 2-year-old. Okay.
Mhm. 2 in August, it says.
Mhm.
And is he getting any other services right now? So I guess the thing is, there's a lot of reasons for why your child could be falling a lot, and it's a very, very broad question.
Services.
No services. Okay,
No services. Okay.
thank you. So, I guess I'd want to know if he's able to walk. Like, is he falling all the time when he's in the house and he's running around? Is he not negotiating things that are on the floor so that he's tripping over things that are on the floor? Is it sometimes the strength of our feet and our ankles might be impacting our ability to keep our balance. It's a tough question to ask because it's very, very general.
Okay. Just falling while running.
Just
And
falling
walking.
while running. Okay.
But he's nonstop moving, you said? Okay.
I missed that part. Oh, yeah. So again, there may be other reasons if he is moving all the time. And is Amanda still here? So there may be some sensory things that are impacting how his ability to like be able to be well grounded in space and be able to take in his environment to help him keep his balance, or what's his vision look like. So there.
Would that be enough to request an eval, Janet? If 2 in August, not jumping and falling a lot, is that enough to elicit services?
Well, if he was 2 in August, he's not jumping. I wonder what he's doing, how he's doing on the stairs. if you have concerns, then I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't ask for an evaluation anyways, right? As a parent, if you've got concerns,
Mhm.
access the service, that's what it's for. And then through that evaluation, you'd have two sets of eyes looking at not just the gross motor aspects of how he moves and plays, but how he's able to interpret his environment and from a sensory perspective, you know, how he is able to move his body through space and interact and move around.
Okay.
Did that help? I think if you have concerns as a parent, use early intervention. That's what it's there for.
Mhm.
That seems helpful. So good. All
Anything
right.
else?
It was quiet.
No.
Well, thank you to Jana and Mary for providing this wonderful information. And I think it's a super helpful webinar to even just be able to pass on to other families.
So
Those
I-
pictures were incredible. The pictures were
yeah.
so perfect for just like visual learners like myself to see exactly what you mean as you're talking about it. I thought that was incredible. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I just noticed, the question, do I bring it up to the pediatrician to start that? So, I mean, you can mention it to your pediatrician, but you can call it early intervention directly. You don't need your pediatrician to make that phone call. And it is 753 kids, right? Is that the number?
Mhm.
Yep. So you can call 753 kids. You can put in your concerns, and then they'll get back to you and ask you some questions, and they'll go from there as to how to proceed with an evaluation if they feel it's warranted based on the information you provide them.
So good. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks to
You're welcome.
everybody for attending.
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
From a therapist's point of view, it was also super helpful, as always.
Well, and it was fun because when Mary and I would talk about a certain activity, it was interesting how she had her set of ideas and I had my set of ideas, and just the variety and creativity and problem solving, right? So
We had a lot of fun connecting, planning. So it was
Yeah.
good.
yeah. So